a cloudy South Africa, and this is South African Prepper. So part 2 of the Unprepared Will Not Survive. In our first video we discussed how people actually don't see a collapse coming and how people actually deny that a collapse is actually possible. So for part 2 we'll be talking about the unprepared not being prepared, and how the unprepared will actually not even last the collapse. So if you look at the current world situation, global financial crisis, global unemployment crisis, global food supply crises, we've got global phenomenons of weather where we've had North America going through droughts and Europe going through floods, and the whole China debacle, and the whole let's put everybody in their houses debacle. So if you put all of these things together, at some point they will definitely end up in a bottleneck. And what the bottleneck will create, it will actually create a large percentage of the world's population. Now if you look at how many people are actually prepared in the world, preppers like yourself watching this video, it is an actual fact, normally it's a very small percentage of people in that specific country. If I take our own country, if I take my own people, I would reckon not even between 8 and 10% are maybe prepared for what is coming. So once this bottleneck takes place, a lot of these unprepared people will be desperate. Now if you are a prepper, the chances of you surviving is much better than the unprepared, because once the collapse, and there's a whole lot of reasons why a collapse can take place in a country like South Africa or wherever you are from. There's a whole lot of reasons why a collapse can take place. So globally it is the financial crisis, globally it is a food and food supply chain issue and maybe a food shortage issue. Unemployment could be an issue, regardless of the reason. When a collapse takes place, people are going to be absolutely desperate, and this is the first point at which a lot of people will not survive, because they will be desperate as the collapse progresses. Because you have to understand, a collapse, it's not like a switch that you can switch on and off. It doesn't happen like this. It actually progresses and it builds up to a proper collapse of your country. These people will become extremely desperate. They will put themselves into extremely desperate situations and maybe even life-threatening situations. So this is where I believe being a prepper will give you the advantage, because when the collapse takes place, the first couple of weeks or months, you will actually not put yourself at so much risk by going to the stores to panic buy or trying to get money or trying to get this or that. You'll actually take yourself away from those dangers, and you will sit back and you will determine what your next move will be, whether it is bugging in or then bugging out. And obviously myself, including our prepping community, is for a bugging out, a strategic relocation process. And then once the collapse have taken place, obviously your surrounding areas will be absolutely total chaos. You can go read about Venezuela and Zimbabwe and the Bosnia situation. You can go have a look at recent events, Durban, and you'll understand that once chaos takes place, things don't recover back to as they used to be. So as a prepper, you'll firstly be prepared, okay, to withstand the first initial collapse, okay, where the unprepared will be desperate at that stage, panic buying, fighting in the queues for maybe the last loaf of bread or sugar or coffee, you will not be in that situation. Once the process then actually progresses, people will become even more desperate. Then those, what we call in theory, the gangs will then form up. There might be good gangs, there might be bad gangs, and I believe in South Africa we'll have more bad gangs than good gangs, because when people are hungry, they do desperate things. And this is where the prepper will again survive, because the prepper will have a plan, okay, for beyond the collapse. We have a plan in place where we can already put structures in place of security, or structures in place for producing our food, or structures in place by which we can occupy an area in larger numbers, by which we can then try and carry on life as normal as possible. Obviously it won't be normal, because you would have by that stage lost your house, maybe packed all of the things that you could have packed, but you will, within that community, you will actually have the security to try and carry on to live as normal as possible. And this again is why we do believe that the preppers in this world have got the upper hand. Why, if you live in any city in the world, staying inside those cities is suicide, and that preppers do have the advantage of having a plan after the collapse and not just trying to survive the collapse. So what we can learn from this is that as a prepper there are prepping stages which you need to apply. It is the physical prepping for the physical collapse that's going to happen, and then it is the physical prepping for after the collapse has happened, and try and survive in the long term run. Because you have to understand that the prepping things that you do stock and buy and keep in your pantry or keep in your trailer or in your garage can only last so long. It could only sustain you for so long. There are very few preppers that I know that can sustain themselves for a full 5 years. So at some point you will have to look at a sustainable way of producing food for your for your family, and then for your prepping community as well. So this is why we do believe that the unprepared will not survive.